The delusional district attorney Paul Howard is claiming that the man that punched a police officer in the face, stole his taser, then ran off with it and turned back around and used it on the police officer was of no threat to police and didn't exhibit any aggressive behavior. Just watch.
Mr. Brooks never presented himself as a threat. At the very beginning, he was peacefully sleeping in his car, but Mr. Brooks never displayed any aggressive behavior.
While Paul Howard is disconnected from reality, allow me to refresh your memory on what actually happened.
Here, put your hands behind your butt. Hey, stop fighting! Stop fighting! Stop fighting! Stop fighting! You're gonna get tased! You're gonna get tased! Stop! Mr. Wrong! Stop! Come on, man! Stop! You're gonna get tased! Mr. Wrong! Hands off the taser! Hands off the taser! Stop fighting! Hands off the taser! Stop fighting!
To say that Rayshard Brooks was non-aggressive and non-threatening to police officers was a great mischaracterization of what had happened. And now, Paul Howard is claiming that the officer's life was not threatened because a taser is not considered a deadly weapon. But just 2 weeks ago, he completely contradicted himself and said the exact opposite, that a taser is in fact a deadly weapon. Just watch.
At Mrs. Pilgrim, and as many of you all know, under Georgia law, a taser is considered as a deadly weapon under Georgia law. And
so that was 2 weeks ago in reference to a police officer using a taser on a Black Lives Matter protester. Back then, tasers were considered deadly. Fast forward 2 weeks later, Rayshard Brooks uses a taser on a police officer, and Paul Howard characterizes this as non-threatening and says that Rayshard Brooks was just peacefully sleeping in his car when a racist white police officer came over and shot him. It's pretty clear what Paul Howard is trying to do. He has a re-election coming up soon, and he's trying to rally the support of Black Lives Matter protesters. What better way to do that than to suggest that the officer's actions were racially motivated? And he does exactly that.
One of the officers, immediately after the shooting, did not reflect any fear or danger of Mr. Brooks, but their actions really reflected other kinds of emotions.
Other types of emotions. We can already see where this is going. Paul Howard is trying to paint the picture that this was a racially motivated hate crime and had nothing to do with Rayshard Brooks stealing an officer's taser and trying to use it against him. After all, according to Paul Howard, Rayshard Brooks was just peacefully sleeping in his car when a racist police officer came over and shot and killed him. So if you are going to claim this is a racially motivated hate crime, one question you might want to ask yourself is what would happen if a white person did the exact same thing? If they had stolen a police officer's taser? Well, this had happened. It happened to a man named Jeremy Scott, and it didn't end very well for him. Except there was no protests, the officers were never fired, there was no murder charges. But in striking contrast, the officers were actually heralded for their good policing.
Things took a turn, though, when the sheriff says he grabbed a deputy's taser, tasing the officer and another detective.
And other deputies were engaged in the fight as well, trying to get the suspect, Jeremy Scott Jennings, to comply with the instructions of law enforcement.
But when that didn't work and Jennings refused to drop the taser, he was shot.
I think our deputies did a remarkable job under the circumstances.
Regardless of your color, everybody knows that when you steal a police officer's weapon and try to use it against them, it doesn't end well. But that doesn't stop corrupt District Attorney Paul Howard from insinuating that the officer's actions were racially motivated, and then suggesting that the entire Atlanta Police Department has deep-rooted systemic racism. Not sure how that can be when 58% of the police force is black. That is greater than the percentage of black people in Atlanta. Other police officers are very reluctant to go back to work after witnessing one of their co-workers charged with murder after trying to defend himself. And you can't blame them. Who would want to work in an environment like this where you get paid about the same as a teacher, your job is extremely dangerous, and if you get attacked by a violent criminal and try to defend yourself, you get charged with murder? For all the people calling to defund the police, you might not even have to wait that long, because at this rate, they will all quit well before they are defunded. And you'll be on your own with no numbers to call and no one to cry to for help when trying to defend yourself against the Rayshard Brooks of the world.